events like these so we can all get together, win some swag, and learn about Zendesk stuff. With me is Dave Dyson, who I don't really think needs an introduction if you've seen his famous dishwasher cookie video. If you haven't, we will be linking that in the chat as well. But Dave Dyson is also a specialist here on the community and helps out with a lot of our content and publications. Thanks for joining us, Dave.
Happy to be here.
He also, if you couldn't tell, loves his books.
I do.
And last but not least, we have Cat Hurley, who is a manager on the Zendesk Agent Advocacy team. Cat Hurley, aside from making all the bells and whistles that make our customer service team work, is also an expert on managing, setting up, and initiating agent teams for different purposes throughout the Zendesk agency. And we're really lucky to have her here talking about agent team best practices. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity as well.
You know what? Honestly, I've wanted you to be in one of these events for quite some time. I felt like we just had to kind of wrestle with some scheduling back and forth, but you're here now. And I hope that we get to have you for future events as well, because I feel like there's a lot to talk about when it comes to building out agent teams and how to go about that and how it can be not a 1, 2, 3 easy experience as well, especially in the last year we've lived in.
Definitely, 100%. As you said, this could be a series, but I think that's your way of tricking me into doing more of these public speaking events. So
I just heard that it's a series now, so now it's a series. We'll see you in a couple months. It's going to be great.
Well, thank you.
Oh, real quick, it does look like we also have a few of our advocates in the chat. I want to just give a special shout out to Heather Rommel. You probably, if you've been to a few of our events, you've seen her in past events as well, answering a few questions on different areas. I believe it was support last time, but welcome, Heather. We're really glad to have you here. Also, Heather is getting a mug because she just let us know where she's also from. Without further ado, let's jump into the meat and potatoes of this event.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just to give you an idea, and I tell you, this is not where we all are right now, but imagine life pre-2020. These are our offices across the world, and I've actually listed out those that have advocates in them. Our largest offices do have a customer support presence. This is very purposeful from the get-go, which is that we feel that our advocates are the heart of what we do as a company. And we are often, we call our agents advocates. And that's because we really feel like they're advocating on the customer's behalf. And so we really want to amplify that voice. And so us being close to and supporting our internal teams as well, our sales teams, our success teams, all the way up to the top. And so we do have a strong presence in each region. You can see at the top there some numbers. That's just to give you an idea of our scale. And the lovely pink arrow at the bottom is just to show that we are a follow the sun model. So as APAC goes to sleep, our friends in Dublin come online and then followed by EMEA as well. Next slide. Okay, this one's extremely important to me, and it's always been at the heart of when I think about what we do, and that is that the customer experience and agent experience is the thing that makes, Dave, click, the support experience. That was so good. You can tell that we practiced. So what we mean by that is that and I'll give you the best example that I have is when we rolled out chat in 2015, which I realize is dating me in Zendesk years, even though Dave does surpass me a little bit there. Is it 9.5?
Yeah, Dave's coming up on his decade.
It's almost a decade. I've only been here 6.5, so not as long. But when we first rolled out chat to some of our customers in 2015, we really took this to heart, which is you're not going to have happy customers if your team aren't happy and enjoying what they do. Like, it really does shine through in all the interactions that they have. And so we really focused before we even looked at what it would look like at the front end. We really just spent all our time focusing on the agent experience. So what does it look like? What does it look like the back end? How easy is it to shift channels from chat to something else? Where would we see the information that we need to make some of those judgments about where to route the ticket? And so we really, really focused on those before we even started looking at what it looked externally. And I do think that's what made it a pretty great launch at the time. And we expanded that, which I will go into in a bit now. So a lot of people are interested in our structure and kind of like lifting the curtain behind what is Zendesk support within Zendesk. So the first model I'm going to talk you through is what we were doing before. So we had a generalist tiered model in support. And what that means is we supported all of our Zendesk products. Back in the day, that was support, chat, and talk. It soon grew to around 10 product areas of varying difficulties. And we remained in this generalist tiered model. It was easy to scale. It's good in the sense that you have very defined roles. Our product support team were taking our live channels. And typically we're also taking async tickets that actually kind of like troubleshooting, how to type stuff, things that we could help provide documentation to or do some initial investigation without getting into any additional tools. Our tier 2 team were the ones that were digging into logs, were actually going into some deeper troubleshooting. And our tier 3 team, where most of our customers sometimes want to skip to, is like the worst place you can end up. Because they're lovely, lovely, wonderful people, but tier 3 means something's up. We haven't been able to work it out until this point, and it may be something that needs to go to product or dev. So all of these are served by triage. Triage is not some magical process or program. It is a person that has a lot of knowledge around Zendesk and was able to make judgment calls based on where something should go based on complexity. Rather than, again, any type of specific product skill area. And this was nice from a headcount model perspective. You looked at the handle time of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. You looked at the amount of volume that was going to each of those places via tags, and you were able to come up very quickly with how to scale your team. However, we had a problem, and the problem was those 10 products, and we love creating new products. It's like one of our favorite things to do. We love doing it. It's great. We also don't like leaving any products behind. So we tend to hold on to some as long as possible, especially if customers are enjoying using them. And so we end up supporting both things that we're not necessarily developing anymore, the things that are our basic products, and also new things as well. And expecting advocates to kind of keep all that information just became too much. The other thing that this didn't do is allow us to scale chat. So whenever we had more chat or phone calls, you had to move those tier 2s into tier 1, and then you get a backlog within our technical support. So what did we do about this? I'm about to tell you. So we added a step, and the step was skills-based routing. It's actually native in the chat product. And what that meant is that we were able to actually identify, either through the customer selecting at this point through a product tray, what the skill set was, and then get it to someone with that skill set. This also meant that we were able to increase our chat and make it our focus channel. And if you click once more, Dave, we actually were only able to do that by having our product support and support engineers all take chat. So it was a big change management piece. And so we were able to get tickets to people that have knowledge in those specific areas. And we were also able to have more staffing around there. And then we kept support architects and some support engineers as well. They tend to do 50-50, so do a bit of both in the box and out of the box, actually swarming. So we were able to kind of have a sense of ownership. And then have a team that swarmed and were able to kind of help answer questions for things that were more technical. This also helped us share knowledge as well, so more on the job kind of learning. One of the other pieces here is that we were able to kind of build squads around multi-tiers. Previously, we had very specific we had TSE management and product support management, and this meant that we were able to kind of combine everyone together and kind of create that inner swarming, and then also have a more global swarming presence as well. So we were where customers wanted to be, which was with chat. We were able to swarm and learn, and we were also able to kind of become those specialist teams. And that's something we've been iterating on for a while. And Devin, I do think I will have to come back because this will be out of date very soon as we start to look about how to innovate even more. And so, but this is how we are currently structured. And I will also add here that I was not a fan of going to a chat first model. As someone from the technical support background, I was a little bit hesitant on how we would be able to do technical troubleshooting over chat. What this does allow us to do is we have much more of our interactions authenticated, so we know who the customer is. And we're able to have what would be a week's worth async back and forth. We're able to do very quickly and then move it on if needed to the right place to get solved. So yeah, that's my very complex slide to show. See, the first one was easier, wasn't it? But the second one is is definitely where we're at today. And because we're able to kind of again almost kind of create the bracket around the chat, we're still able to kind of look at headcount from where our customers are at and where they want to reach us.
Kat, I do have a question. You see 8 live channels. That's a pretty big number and big percent. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what made such a drastic shift?
Yeah, and actually this number kind of it changes. So actually in terms of incoming volume, around 60%, it floats between 60 to 70% of our interactions are chat. Phone has decreased. It's actually something that we're looking to really focus on is chat and live messaging. It's helpful, especially today when we tend to be at home. We tend to have distractions around. Many more people want to have that experience rather than jumping on a phone with someone. And from a product support, it really is about if we are going to be online and available for customers, we need people to be online and available. And I would say that from a product, when we look at the product support role as it is, some of that live channel we would encapsulate as triage. So that would be making sure they're going through and like helping get tickets in the right place. And some of it would be phone as well. So it's a whole mix of different. It's more the role itself and what they do there.
Awesome. And then I know you mentioned squads and you kind of into that a little bit, but I noticed the previous month those teams, and we have this big kind of like did those tiers kind of disappear with the transition of squads, or did they just get up in the batch and now they're like cookies of like different tier sets? And what is that exactly?
Yeah, it's the tiers, so as they were before, where they were like very specific roles and responsibilities, I think they've kind of developed into being knowledge levels. And so within that box, you have a mix of different knowledge levels. And often this group will swarm between themselves before they need to pull in any further tiers as well. And so it really is about the number of skills people know. So Typically, when someone is starting with us, they'll know support, and they'll also know questions about my account. So kind of finance questions, things like that. And then as people add skills and become more expert in areas, that's when they kind of transition through. So even though they're supporting the same customers, it's more about how far you're able to go in that troubleshooting, how much you're able to give back through swarming and sharing that knowledge as well.
We did also have a question real quick. Asks, does Zendesk follow SLAs?
We're actually moving to use, if you're talking about the functionality, we're actually going to start using it more in future, so more to come on that. And in terms of SLAs, we use them for specific customers. So for our Premier Essential and Premier Enterprise customers, they have SLAs. The rest of them are internal, but they're the ones where we use the SLA app. And we have that. We have various configurations in place to make sure that we get to those requests in time. But it would go through the same workflow, which is what is the issue, get through to someone, and then ensuring that we follow up within a certain amount of time, depending on business impact.
Awesome.
Okay, next slide. So from an organizational perspective, this is how we look. This is core advocacy specifically. And I really do want to focus on squad manager and advocate roles. What I would say is that from the director and senior manager perspective is trying to take on change management, process changes, training, those kind of things. We're working out what we need to do and strategically trying to take that off the plate so that the squad manager can really be focused on the squad. 90% globally of our squad managers were previously advocates as well. So it's just to kind of highlight, we really do want to promote from within. It's the same with our advocate roles. If you look at our technical support engineers, we really try and grow that technical knowledge and promote from within rather than looking to hire external, which we sometimes do as well. And really it's to say, you kind of saw it on the other slide, but that squad is made up of all tiers, all roles. And the idea is that, managers are there to get rid of the blockers that may be stopping our advocates from being able to do their role. So being there to do regular one-to-one sessions, like being there to really focus on coaching, focusing on things like live channel monitoring. And from an advocate perspective, we really try and lay out the day in a way that they don't have to think too much about what is the priority, where should I be, or feeling torn between different priorities. So we use WFM software. We have various schedules throughout the day. And then the advocate works with the manager if anything impacts what they're able to do during the day, if something overruns, for example. And we have a job architecture within the advocate level. This is another thing that is currently being worked on, but we have various paths. One is getting more technical. We also have senior levels for those that may want to that master a particular area, but maybe they don't want to go into technical deep dive troubleshooting. Maybe they want to stay an expert on helping with live channel coverage. Like they just love interacting with customers that way. And we're also adding different customer experiences over the next 6 months. And so that's another area where we've been able to kind of look at people's strengths and talk about what customers they really want to focus on in the future. Next slide. Oh, no, not next slide.
I mean, we could definitely hit that next slide, not a problem. We did have a quick question, and I do want to address it since we recently just talked about this. Curious, are we bound by SLAs for tickets? And do we enforce the SLAs? And if so, how do we do it?
So from an SLA perspective, again, it is those two customer segments. So it is our Premier Essentials and Premier. We're actually going to start using SLAs more to help with our own queue management and some of those internal internal goals that we have. But for now, the way that we enforce SLAs is they get pushed to the top of the queue. Our advocates are asked to look at those tickets. We also have integrations with Slack, which is what we use at Zendesk from a messaging perspective to be able to ping everyone essentially that's online at any time. Should we be getting close to, should someone not take ownership of the ticket, so we can get a response out regardless on if there's an assignee or not. And we make it everyone's responsibility. Like everyone is responsible. If I am online, I am responsible for getting to the ticket. And so you will, it's very much something where we share the ownership of that. And that's how we manage it.
Great. Real quick, I do want to kind of interject. It does look like some are having issues asking questions in the Q&A section of the chat. I am seeing questions pop in there. I saw one just pop in 4 minutes ago. But if you have any problem submitting a question in the Q&A section, feel free to drop them in general. I will be making sure that we keep a close eye on that. The last thing we want is anyone here who has a question being able to ask it due to a technical glitch. So keep those questions coming. We definitely are going to get through as many as possible, if not all of them. But yeah, if the Q&A is not working, drop them in general.
And there was a question in the Q&A that was, what are the metrics that we use to judge our agent's performance? I
am so glad you asked that, Dave. Would you click? It feels like that was planted, but it was not. So
thanks CJ for that question. He gets CJ gets the credit.
See, I'm going to bribe later. Yes, so metrics is something we get asked about a lot. And so I did want to touch upon that. So here are our core metrics, the things that we look at and really care about. And as you can see, I have boxed them. You would also notice that some seem more behavioral than KPI. If you do one more click, Dave. This is because we look at metrics from a who is responsible standpoint in terms of whether it's senior manager, like director level. I was kind of talking to you about that, more of the looking at, are we as a globe doing the same things, and that regional performance. That's our responsibility to make sure, apart from CSAT, which I will go into a bit later. It's ours, but it's also others. And then from an advocate and squad manager perspective, we really focus on what are the behaviors and are we able to achieve those? An advocate on their own cannot guarantee a CSAT. An advocate on their own cannot guarantee a first reply time. There could be many different factors that impact that. That's our job to try and figure out. But what we can do is say, this is the behavior and this is how it impacts that overall metric. And so these are the things to strive for. If you click again, I've just got some of the things that this is how we approach metrics. Firstly, everyone has access. We do not believe that it should be something that's hidden. Everyone can see everyone's metrics. And part of that is we want the advocate to feel empowered, that they're not having to wait for their manager to say if they're doing well or not. Like they can see those key indicators and they can kind of own their own journey. We do go through SMART goal setting in terms of what metrics should be. We're kind of currently going through a shift, again, something that I can come and talk about in future as part of my new series that I'm doing, apparently, what we can go into. But previously we aimed to really like have those, we set them we use Workday through OKR setting. And that's something that we really we really want to have things that are achievable. And if they're not achievable, we then want to go back and go, hey, due to XYZ, these are no longer achievable. So this is what we're looking to do instead, or this is how we're adjusting, and try our best to be as transparent as possible about how the business sets those as well. This is how the business sets our productivity. This is how we think we can achieve it. It also allows us to do headcount this way. And the other two things that I would call out are, firstly, we use solves per hour from an overall standpoint. I do not like solves per hour as an agent metric, because what does 1.3 mean to me? Like, am I counting when I do a ticket in a third? That doesn't make sense. I think you need to look at much longer period of time. And in my feeling is that a 12-week rolling average is really good to spot a trend and be able to say, what is it over that amount of time? But it really helps us from a business perspective, because we have different locations, and different locations will have slightly different operating hours. What happens when you have a public holiday? How do you judge how well you've performed that week? And so per hour really allows us to dive into that and be a bit more accurate. And my final point, before I feel like Devon's going to say something to me, is CSAT is owned by everyone at Zendesk. It's owned by the sales interaction that you have. It's owned by product. It's owned by everyone. And that's another thing that we're really kind of pushing as a concept. Again, occasionally we need to remind everyone, but it's something that not just customer support owns.
I do have one follow-up, and then we do have a couple questions pending that I do. So you mentioned solves per hour not being a metric that you want to lean into. Obviously there's some data issues that can be skewed by looking at it in such a narrow lens versus what you've just described, looking at over like a 12-month period or whatever metric you want to kind of use over an extended period of time. Do you feel that the negative impact upon the agent who's being held by that metric could also negatively impact their performance due to trying to hit that mark versus maybe give the best customer service to one of our customers?
Yeah, I think that it is about how do you balance doing the best for every customer and also being as available as possible for customers. And I think that is always just the balance that you have to get. I think that, again, by focusing on the behavior, which is what is the quality like on average of a request? Are you on the channel that you are scheduled to be on? What is average handle time, right? Because you may spend 2 hours with one customer really focusing on because you know that you can add value. And then you may have 5 others, which are just a document. And so being able to look at averages, and I 12 weeks. Data is important. It's actually a conversation we have quite often, because we do have weekly dashboards, particularly at an executive level, that get looked at. And CSAT is one that can really, it's a roller coaster, right? Depending on the number of responses you get on that week, depending on, there is a delay in response. So the actions you can take aren't necessarily on a week by week basis. It's really important to look at that from a trend line. And I would say that trying to make those changes in the moment can be, without the full picture, can definitely impact performance.
All right. First of all, fantastic response. And second of all, speaking of CSAT, we're getting a lot of questions on CSAT, so I think we should go ahead and drill into some of these a little bit. I'm going to start with some of the ones that were dropped in general so they don't disappear, and then we'll move over to the Q&A section. Patrick asks, are there plans to expand CSAT into broader metrics, such as like 5-star rating systems, or measure other metrics such as net promoter score? That's a pretty good question, Patrick.
We do use NPS for some. We find that CSAT is just the quickest, and also one where, as painful as it is, as I have said, an advocate is not fully responsible for that. We do want customers to feel they can leave any type of feedback. And that, again, comes back to we own all of it. So if it's I hate that the product doesn't do this. One that we typically get is, Dwight was amazing, but the product, I really need to do X, Y, Z. We still want them to be able to give that feedback because that's how we get it to product and that's how we improve. So that's why we personally use it. I know that we use MPS for some, and I don't think there are any plans to change our native CSAT and how it gives ratings. It's a really good one for product, though, that we can take away and ask if they have any upcoming ways of changing CSAT. But for now, it is the thumbs up, thumbs down, brutal feedback, either way, good or bad.
I'll add that there are some apps in our apps marketplace that can offer some of these. Nice Reply offers customer effort score and NPS as well. So I just dropped a link into that. Of course, that's a separate service that you'd have to pay Nice Reply as well. But once you're signed up with them, then you can integrate that with Zendesk.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Next, let's go ahead. I want to make sure I just didn't miss anything. Perfect. CJ, who has a few questions, so let's try to get through these as well. Is there a reason why we don't use our own tools for support? Like agents not using messaging, workplace skills, or having SLAs excluding the Premier team?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do whenever we get a new tool is work out how it works for our specific customer base as well. I always say that we are our own customer of Zendesk and how we use it. And as we get tools, we try and be early adopters because we want to be able to advocate for our customers on everything. Some of the things that you mentioned, without going into details of which ones, again, get me back in 6 months, please. And we can talk about it again. But all I know is that whenever we have tools, we aim to utilize as many as possible and really, because that is how we create the best experience, is through our own agents using it.
Excellent. We also have a question. How do we pull occupancy rate from Zendesk?
So a really good one. We do not. So I'll be fully honest there. We actually have our own workforce management system. There's quite a few that plug in really well to Zendesk. We happen to use Agile software. And so that's where we see occupancy.
And we have a team that handles that whole process for us, correct?
We have a whole team. When I started, it was a Google Doc. And then it was team leads, and now it's a whole operational team. So that's me plugging WFM to come and do a session because I think it would actually be very useful.
Oh, we're definitely going to try to make that happen for sure. Continuing on with questions, what is our staffing plan to allow servicing customers via chat? And what are our goals for average reply time in chat?
Yeah, so we try and get to every chat within 240 seconds, which I believe in my very basic math works out to about 4 minutes. We have a couple of things that happen and why we look for that. The first thing is using skills-based routing. When a ticket comes in with a specific skill, we look for someone that has that skill. And by we, I mean SBR. I always think of all our tools as individuals or bots. So it will look around and look for someone with the skill. And if they do not have that skill, it will then route to the person that has the next available ability to try and help, right? Because there's one thing getting to a specialist, and there's also just starting to get some help, even if they need to put a specialist in. And so that's why we have that length of time to allow for us for the bot to scan and look for someone and then get to it. And we look at that from an average perspective, and from a metric perspective, we also look at getting that 80% of the time. That's how we look at it from an average health score.
From some of the comments in the chat, it does look like we are hitting that mark. So glad to hear that people are getting swift responses in chat. We also have a couple more questions actually, and then we'll get on with the presentation some more, but I don't want to miss these. CJ asks or mentions that a lot of their tickets never get CSAT surveys, and is curious on what the rules that we use to decide whether or not to send a CSAT in the first place.
Yeah, I don't believe it's interesting. I'm definitely going to look into that, CJ, and have a look at your profile after this, because I think and I don't want to be quoted, but I realize this is recorded and put on YouTube. So this is me saying I think rather than I know. I know that there is some, for example, if we are responding to service incidents, we try not to include those because it is very much we're responding out to say what's happening. But I can double check that because I could be horribly wrong and get back to you. But there shouldn't be a reason that you are not getting CSAT notifications. They go out for every interaction that we have.
And CJ, if you are experiencing some problems, myself and Dave from the community team, we'd be more than happy to talk with you after the event and get some feedback from you, because the last thing we want is you to be running into anything that would give you less than an amazing experience with our CS team. One more question, or maybe two. I might have just lied. Sherry asks, is there some really good videos on how to use and customize Explore? There absolutely is some really good videos on how to use and customize Explore, along with a lot of articles. Sherry, I'll go ahead and try to find some of that. Dave, maybe we can go ahead and share some of that with Sherry before the event's over today.
Sure, I'll see what I can find there.
And I think our last question, what event do we use in reporting on CSAT? And I think it's solved, request for last updated, etc.
Oh, I'm just at the wrong part. I just wanted to read that again. What event do you use in reporting on CSAT and why? Yeah, it is. So the event data we use on CSAT is the last person it is assigned to. So we do have that problem where CSATs are inherited, but given that we try to look at CSAT on again, on more of a overview of the company, it's more about the fact that we go in and we dig into those and then we take the action needed. Some CSATs are because the advocate has handled it incorrectly or given the wrong information, and then that is something that we can go back and say, hey, on this particular instance, this is something that you need to do. But as a whole, we just try to look at CSAT from an experience standpoint.
Awesome. I know we have a few more questions pending. I do want to make sure we get through this whole presentation. So Kat, let's go ahead and continue. Also, one other thing, because we don't have members of the product team here, we'll be very limited to answer any kind of questions on product updates or whether or not a certain product feature will be available in a certain quarter. That's something that currently we're not able to address at this event. That being said, if you do have those kind of questions, we still want to know them and do our best to go ahead and bring that to the product team and then circle back with you with a response. It might not be right away. The product team kind of works at the beat of their own drum and shares what they're ready to share it. But we're happy to take that feedback to them.
Awesome. Okay, we'll move on. I'll try and go super quick.
No,
so we have more time for questions.
We soft cut off at 11:45, but we can go until 12 o'clock if needed.
Okay. Okay, click. Life before. So we moved to remote working March last year, like many people probably. We thought, oh, we'll go back in a couple of weeks, and we did not. So I mean, you've probably seen we're incredibly spoiled. We have a lovely office space with ping pong tables, as you can see. We had our managers and advocates all sat together in an open plan office, which allowed for awesome collaboration. We had soft spaces. We have an amazing CSR team who do so many volunteering opportunities. We have employee communities for various different groups. Like it's a nice place. And then this happened. The after. So I have a couple of pictures here. One shows that I may only put on a blazer when asked to come and talk to a group of people. And the second, I actually asked permission. We have a Slack channel called Unglamorous Work From Home, and it was actually started after a work from home channel. Honestly, everyone's spaces looked immaculate, like nice open spaces, and we started a channel that was like, this is the reality, you know, people on cushions on the floor. We've been extremely lucky in that we were provided support to purchase and actually set up our own home area, so I'm not always on a balcony overlooking a main road. However, we are currently remote. There is a phased return, and it was also optional if people wanted to go back or not. So we've actually started a lot of hiring remotely, which has been amazing as well from my diversity perspective. It's allowed us to get so much more rich group of onboarding advocates. And that's a whole other session as well, is how you onboard a group of people remotely as opposed to in a classroom space where we actually had our own classroom before. We've started doing Zoom Hangouts just to try and recreate what it is to be around a table with people. We've asked our managers to set up regular shadowing sessions. This is really important. It's a couple of hours with advocates once a month. And it is not I'm going to come and watch you work and comment on everything you're doing and micromanage. It is hey, can I just come and hang out with you, be on a Zoom, and I'm there just to see how things are going and see if I can learn from you and your workflow. And that's important for everyone. It's important for high performers, for those that may be struggling for any reason, and just for the you know, those that are steady performers as well, just being able to learn. And that also helps us check up on things like the working from home environment. You know, just because we got set up last April doesn't mean people have been able to keep the same setup. And so being able to offer more help and assistance and making sure we fully understand what's going on around and being there to support, essentially. We do lean more on those workforce management tools that I was talking about. So like Agile, to be able to tell us a picture of occupancy. And we don't use that as I noticed that from 3:00 yesterday, there was less occupancy. It is I noticed that at some points in your day, like regularly, there isn't so much. What can I do to help you? Are we struggling at time? Is that a time to schedule a break and really work with advocates to understand what's happening? And then this is all down to like just the awesome people that we work with, but people have set up Zoom nights. There's been quizzes after work. There's been films. Volunteering's got really creative, you know, sending out packs for people to make cards and stuff. So there's a ton of work that goes on behind the scenes that I can't take any credit for. My final slide is one that's very close to my heart. Firstly, this is an internal logo that we have that we created, I want to say like 2014, 2015. It's our advocacy logo, and it's the fact that we are there whenever you need us. And of course, the problem with that is how do we stay fully online and help, and at the same time encourage our own team to take the time to look after themselves? And Dave, for some reason, I made this one where you have to click for every single item, and I apologize. But firstly, we had to take some company initiatives and adapt them. Zendesk was incredible. They gave a subscription to meditation apps. They made sure that we had access to counseling. They had so many things that were great sizes, fits for everyone. And then they also had some that worked for 90% of employees, but didn't quite help a 24/7 support organization. And those included things like Flexi Fridays. We can't just all leave on a Friday because our customers may have questions on Friday afternoons. In fact, they often do. No Meeting Wednesday takes on a new spin when a lot of your time meetings become the thing that you are able to take a break from. So we switched it. no meeting Wednesdays became meeting Wednesdays. Like we tried to do more around having team meetings where they were fun and they were not things where you had to have your brain switched on before you could just come and hang out. When it came to Flexi Friday, rather than just being like, oh, you can take the same time off whenever you can and make it just seem like I guess less thoughtful, we actually worked for our WFM team and made it so that our advocates squads got the same half day off in a week. It may not be Friday, so that they could like have team lunch and then go for the day. And so it felt like we were doing something slightly different. Next. Calendar review was twofold. It was what do we need to take away and what do we need to add? Do we need to add more stand-ups so that people see each other every day? Do we need to take out some of these things that seemed important at the time, but right now wouldn't allow our managers just to focus on their team? Next. We increased communication. I would say communication is a work in progress anywhere. One of the things that we learned was that people wanted to hear more from us, not less. And so we started an email that we sent out, a newsletter. And the first section of that email was always about mental health, a reminder to take PTO, a reminder of what was available before we went into, here are some changes you may see. We really, really tried to put that as priority number one. And then we asked managers to make it the first thing they asked in one-to-ones. We made it the first thing that got raised in team meetings. It's so important that people knew that even if we're busier than we've ever been before, we have more and more chat than we've ever had before, that it's still okay to switch off. The PTO push was a big one. We were saying take PTO whenever you need it. And at the same time, our policy said give us 2 weeks notice. We felt that the verbal was enough to be like, no, take it whenever you need. But actually we went in and actually looked at our policy and changed it just so there was that underlying, it's okay to do this. And we also even went to the stage of being like, these are some things you can do, and being like, go to the park and read a book, because so many people at the beginning were waiting. I know I was. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin, but you can tell by my accent, I may have friends and family further away. You know, I was waiting for the time I could get back and not wanting to take PTO. And at the same time, I needed to take PTO most during those first couple of months. This was a big one for me personally, was, you know, suddenly managers went from being hey, this is how the best way to do your job and removing your blockers, to counseling people as they were struggling with so much, hosting conversations on social justice. Like they were asked to wear a ton of hats that they would have had no idea that they were going to have to wear. And so we really sat all our managers down and went, you have ears and you care. Like you listen to people, understand exactly what they need, what they're feeling, what they're going through. And actually, that's all you need to do. Have the door open and be available to listen, essentially, is what we're after. And we also reminded managers that they also should take advantage of all of the health benefits and everything to keep them in a position where they can do that, because managers are the worst at that.
Kat, just to kind of chime in on this, this was something that wasn't just an advocacy thing, that in terms of like the mental health awareness, taking PTO, taking breaks when you needed to, recognizing that 2020 was an interesting year for most people in the world. But this came from the top down. This wasn't something that like small teams were like, we got to figure out a way to do this. Like we actually had this coming from our CEO to our C-suite team on down initiative, correct?
Yeah, 100%. And it was great because that just enables you to then feel empowered to then work with your team as well. And next, safe spaces. I mean, Devin, this is something that we were just talking about yesterday in terms of not only did Zendesk provide like what we already had, which were the employee communities, but also additional sessions where it was hop in, hop out, like things that were accessible for people that may not be able to suddenly be offline for like 2 hours. And also we did a lot of work to make sure that as much as possible could be during things like lunch breaks and things like that, so that people had a chance to attend. We did a lot of work to try and make sure that, again, we can be the right and the left at the same time. And state the obvious. State the obvious was a huge one for me. And it kind of comes back to that PTO. Like, if I'm saying take PTO, it's okay to take PTO. Don't worry about what the handbook says. But also things like when you're feeling stressed, walk. In the same way that we would in the office, we did not think about grabbing our laptop with headset and going to the kitchen and getting a drink or doing whatever, and it just being part of the day. But suddenly when you're at home, you some of those things just don't seem as natural as they would when you could see other people doing it or watch other people. So we really pushed that, hey, you don't have to log off everything. It's okay to still do the things that you were doing in the office without feeling like you're having to take a major step back. It was the same with things like, I don't see anyone anymore. Get a Zoom link together, throw everyone in. We've got some advocates that are great at this, just being like, hey, Zoom link, come and join me, and make a fun space. Like, Zoom is also there for fun and to be able to meet people. And so we did a lot of work just trying to make sure that everyone knew some of the things that may seem obvious and maybe aren't. Things like, if you're struggling right now with your schedule, how do we look at changing it? Things like that. That's it. And these are definitely my personal takes on how things that I learned during that time. But yeah, it was interesting doing this slide and just thinking about everything that's happened. That's it. I'm done. My slides are done. I gave 7 minutes back.
Well, thanks for sharing, Kat. That was actually pretty fantastic. And I know on the community team, and on many other teams within Zendesk, we were painfully aware that last year was going to be a transition period for a lot of people. And Zendesk did a really great job in accommodating that for everyone who worked for Zendesk. So it's good to see that advocacy really leaned into it hard as well. I do want to answer these last few questions that we have pending, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that we have is from Alejandro. He asks, you mentioned that CSAT goes out for each interaction. Do you have any methods for handling many CSAT surveys to do the same to the same person in a relative short amount of time? So like preventing people who keep getting CSATs from constantly getting CSATs, so that way you're getting more of a spread out demographic.
Yeah, I mean, we do operate under we want to give the opportunity every time. So if you are someone who interacts with us a lot, you will get a CSAT every time. One of the things that we've also built for our API is we have our own customer engagement app, and it actually shows us the most recent CSAT interactions that we're able to see straight from the off. Oh, is this someone who just had a bad experience? So that we can try and tackle that straight on and say, hey, I'm going to get to this straight away. I can see that you had a bad experience last time, and help that way. And the other thing is that they are not mandatory in terms of don't feel like you have to rate us every time. Although we do like it, we learn a lot from it, and we care a lot about it. But right now, we don't have any mechanisms to stop, unfortunately, if someone puts in 5 tickets, I'm getting a response for everyone.
I will say there was one of our community moderators, Graham Carmichael, has posted a user tip on limiting the number of CSAT surveys. I've just posted that a link to that in the chat. So, one of the great things that our community moderators do is they come up with creative solutions for things. So it's not something that's built into the product. It's not just a setting you can click, but there are ways you can set up some automations to limit that somewhat. if that's
Yeah.
what you want to do. Like Kat says, we want to hear from as many people as we can. But
yeah, big shout out to the moderator team in general. They are the true heroes of the community. Again, Heather, glad that you're here. We do have, I think, 2 more questions. Just want to make sure we get to these before we all part ways. On the other side of things, we wish there was more message. This might be a product question that we have to bring Rachel to the product team, but I will go ahead and make sure that that is taken to them. And then, yeah. So it does seem that the rest of these questions are product teams, but maybe we can go ahead and answer this one from Josh. Have we ever considered allowing chat to be used to chat internally, so someone doesn't have to go to an exterior product such as Slack/Teams?
Yeah, we're actually looking at how we can utilize some of those other tools that were mentioned earlier. I know in agent workspaces, for example, you have side conversations where you can start in between different teams. I know that's something that we want to be able to utilize so that we're able to do warm handovers more so than we are now, which is reassigning the ticket and also relying a bit more on Slack. We do actually have it so that internally people can chat with us, but we right now ask them to avoid doing that. We want to get to our customers. And so right now, the way we're based is primarily using that as a business decision, but we do want to find more ways to integrate that into our day-to-day in a way that we're able to separate that out compared to prioritizing on our customers.
And Rachel, I do have a question on your question real quick. If I'm understanding it right, are you asking for alternative ways to get support from those within Zendesk who have the knowledge to answer questions, like a Slack channel that you could jump into and ask questions versus submitting a ticket to our advocacy team or going ahead and having a chat with one of our advocates or experts internally? Okay, I'm going to circle back with Rachel to see if she can clarify on that. But maybe we could address that a little bit, Dave. Oh, okay. No, I meant your. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a good. It's something that you can use in that way. Like we have internal teams that use like the chat feature in their own like Zendesk instance and have ticket sharing abilities, but right now it's just not the way that all our departments are using Zendesk.
And then I think the last question for the day, and then Dave, maybe we can clarify on what I was just talking about. What are some tips that we have for when you start establishing skill set routing?
Yeah, so the first one is looking at the volume of requests you have and understanding how to best kind of slice that. So for us, like by far, our biggest skill set is support. I think it varies between 40 and 60%. And so identifying how many people you need in order to support that, for us, it was everyone has to have that skill. It's kind of our base skill, and it's also how we've adapted all our training to be able to lead up to that. But really, it is looking at percentage. It's looking at the intervals that these requests come in. And honestly, from a skills-based routing, even with a team of over 200 with 8 product areas, it's not always perfect. In order to staff 100% to those things, you would need a much larger team or much fewer skills. And so it really is about identifying what your customers are putting in and then understanding how you can staff that. And Dave's posted some practical tips as well.
Thanks, Dave. Well, I believe that's going to be it for us today. Thanks, Cat, again for coming and explaining the whole in and outs of how we do our agent team and the advocacy program overall. I learned a lot and I had a lot of fun. We had some really great questions as well. I did notice some people were asking for a copy of this deck. So if that's okay with you, Kat, I'd like to go ahead and copy that and publish that for people to have access to.
Yeah, I'm sure that we can. I made this deck, just so you know. This is a me deck. I'm basically saying only hold me responsible for the content.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and share this on the event page along with a link to the. So for those who want that deck, they'll have access there, and you should be able to get a recording sent to you via email once we go ahead and publish it. It might take us a day or two, but we'll get that out no later than Monday of next week. Again, thanks everyone for coming. Great questions. I know a few of you had some product questions. We're going to go ahead and pass that off to the product team and follow up with that in the Help Center of a summary article for today. If there's anything we missed or you want to get in contact with us, the email for this event, if you go ahead and just reply email, it will go right to me and I'll go ahead and be able to follow up with it right away. Or I'll go ahead and drop my email in the chat right now and you can hit me directly with whatever things you might need so that way we can make sure we're taking care of you. All right, well, I think that's it for us today. Everyone have a great afternoon, and we will see you again, Kat, for the next part of this series.
Yeah, all right.
7 seasons in a movie.
Oh, yeah. My goodness.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.